This week's discussion post got me to thinking about the extensive research in social psychology and what it suggests that trust is built upon perceptions of competence, predictability, integrity, and benevolence. When individuals trust another person, they tend to view them as reliable and morally sound, which in turn reduces the social distance between the truster and the trustee. Trust is not merely a social or cognitive psychological phenomenon. It is also deeply rooted in the psychological basis of human behavior. This interdisciplinary understanding of trust invites further inquiry into contemporary contexts. Why do individuals trust digital technologies, entities that lack consciousness, emotion, or moral agency? What motivational factors underlie the extension of trust to algorithmic systems and online influencers, especially when traditional cues of trustworthiness are absent or ambiguous? However, how might neurochemical processes contribute to our susceptibility to misinformation and disinformation, or even to the conscious promotion of malinformation? The human body produces several hormones that influence thoughts, emotions, perceptions, and behaviors. Among these are dopamine and serotonin that play particularly important roles in the neuropsychology of trust. Dopamine is typically associated with feelings of excitement, motivation, and elevated levels of dopamine are linked to positive effects in goal-oriented directed behavior, while decreased levels are associated with symptoms of depression. In the context of trust, dopamine is a key player in the reinforcement of learning. It helps individuals learn which behaviors and people to trust based on positive outcomes. Dopamine functions only as a reward signal, but also a mechanism for identifying socially relevant information for future learning. Research indicates, when I looked further into the research, it talks about how dopamine levels are higher in social situations and compared that to interactions with computers, and suggesting that the dopamine levels are being tracked by social context and value signals. It also influences vigor in reward learning, which can shape trusting behaviors. However, dopamine may help alleviate symptoms associated with distrust, such as presecretorial delusions, or by enhancing social learning processes. Now, when it comes to serotonin, this contributes to an emotional regulation and social decision making. Higher levels of serotonin are associated with well being, calmness, and contentment, while lower levels are linked to anxiety, depression, and sleep disturbances. Serotonin plays a critical role in processing the emotional and social context of interactions and influences decisions related to fairness and reciprocity. It also facilitates learning from negative outcomes and punishments. Therefore, this is shaping the cautious and corrective trust behaviors. And most importantly, serotonin and dopamine, when they come together, they operate in a complementary fashion. For example, in animal studies, they have shown that serotonin, when it's not present, can abolish the behavioral effects of dopamine related drugs, suggesting that these neurotransmitters jointly regulate reinforcement in choices and behaviors. The extension of trust to digital technologies and online influencers may be partially explained by the activation of neurochemical pathways typically reserved for humans and for human social interaction. Influencers often talk about the emotionally resonant content that triggers dopamine mediated reward responses, reinforcing trust and engagement. Simultaneously, I feel like that the lack of physical proximity in traditional cues in cyberspace makes this a blur with the boundaries of social distance, making individuals more susceptible to persuasive messaging. Now, when it comes to the neurobiological susceptibility, this has a lot to do with the implications for the spread of misinformation, which is unintentional inaccuracies, disinformation, delivering false things, In malinformation, truths used to cause harm. When emotionally charged or socially, when it comes to social content is encountered, neurochemical responses may override critical evaluation, leading to unconscious acceptance or even active dissemination of misleading information. Trust in digital environments is not solely a cognitive or social construct, it is deeply intertwined with the neurochemical architecture of the human brain. Understanding the roles of dopamine and serotonin in trust formation provides viable insight into the individual's extend trust to a non-sentiment technologies and how they may become vulnerable to manipulative content online. Now, continuing in this, it becomes an interdisciplinary research integrating psychology, neuroscience, and information science, and is essential for further to elucidate these mechanisms and to develop strategies to foster digital literacy and resilience. Thank you.